Success isn't just about strategy, it's about trust. At Bose Public Affairs Group, we put clients first with responsiveness, integrity, and a focus on results. Our team includes former policymakers and government leaders who anticipate issues, navigate challenges, and build winning strategies. From the halls of Congress to the state capitol to City Hall, we understand great outcomes start with listening. Bose Public Affairs Group.
Bose means business.
Hey everybody, welcome to Crossroads Politics here on WTHR Plus. A lot to get to this week. I'm Dustin Grove.
And I'm Emily Longnecker. Let's start with the push to improve childcare here in Indiana. The state is making major changes to the rules and regulations.
They want to anyway. Some state leaders say this is going to make childcare more accessible because we know there's a shortage right now, has been for several years.
Yeah, but I talked with some childcare providers who say they're concerned this proposal may not be the answer.
You're looking at organized chaos in a room full of 3- and 4-year-olds at Muncie's United Daycare Center. And while it might not look like it right now to the untrained eye, there's a rhythm, an unspoken schedule here. Lead teacher Austin Scales says these kids count on every day.
It is a routine. It's structure. It's something that at this age, at all ages really, we need.
Scale worries some of that structure could be disrupted with new rule changes proposed by Indiana's Family and Social Services Administration, the state agency that oversees Indiana's daycares.
If we are loosening some of those regulations, what is going to be the end result of that?
One proposed change Scales is most concerned about is a new rule that would require less education to run and work in a daycare center. Scales is working on his master's and has a bachelor's in early childhood and special education.
There's a lot of teaching involved, not just caregiving.
Under the new rules, Scales' position would only require a high school diploma.
We want to give flexibility to childcare business owners to make the best decisions for them. And know that these are just minimums.
Adam Elson is FSSA's director of the Office of Early Childhood and Out-of-School Learning. He says reducing regulations could lead to more child care centers and lower costs.
We have an affordability problem for families in Indiana, and who's your parents and who's your children, and we have a supply problem.
Elson says the new regulations will help with both.
Those children are the future of our state.
Democratic State Representative Chris Campbell testified Monday about the rule changes. Campbell says if there's a lack of child care in Indiana, it's because hundreds closed after cuts the state made to funding for early child care vouchers used by lower income families.
We already had a shortage of child care providers to begin with, and this is not going to be a fix.
In April, Governor Braun announced $200 million would go back into the voucher program. Days later, the State Budget Committee approved the request. Heading into a budget year, Campbell is calling for an even bigger investment.
Our child care centers need that sustainable funding.
At the end of the day, Austin Scales says he appreciates the state trying to make child care more affordable and increase the supply of it. He doesn't think these new rules are the way to do that, though.
It starts here, all of it.
What happens in the classroom is Scales' focus and the skills of the people teaching the next generation.
And joining us now is Nikki Kelly, editor of the Indiana Capitol Chronicle. So these rule changes, these proposals are just the latest attempt by lawmakers to address this. This has been going on, attempts to address this for a while now, right?
Yeah, I mean, they philosophically don't want to do a broad-based subsidy for anyone needing childcare, so they're trying to go at it in a regulatory sense. But these are careful. A lot of these rules are in place because of tragedies that happened somewhere along the way, and so a lot of them are pretty basic, like, okay, do they need to be on a cot? Can they be on the floor in a sleeping bag? But the big ones where they're lowering the educational attainment of the workers.
What Austin Scales was talking about in that story.
Yeah, I mean, that's a concern. I mean, yes, you'll be able to pay them less and theoretically have more people able to apply for the jobs and fill them, but the question is whether they're going to be able to handle the tasks and the duties.
Interesting though, he told me just to the cot issue, the practicality of that, the cots are easy to wipe down if little kids are having accidents. And he was talking about if we have sleeping bags in here, that adds a whole other layer to this. Them. Absolutely. These were some of the practical things that he was bringing up, the practical concerns that he said.
Which is why they hold these hearings, by the way, so that these people can listen to these concerns.
Yeah. So Nikki, cutting of voucher money and then the return concern using frog funding gave some child care providers whiplash. They talked about that. Do you see lawmakers reinvesting even more in the program? We're heading into a budget year. Do you see them calling for that? Chris Campbell certainly was.
Yeah, and to be fair, Governor McBride has said that they're going to prioritize that when they submit their budget for the next session. I mean, I think he recognizes that, you know, yes, we put this in this time out of the special funding, but we have to keep it going or it's just, you know, just not very helpful. And so I think he'll have to prioritize it and push lawmakers to keep it in the budget.
Parent support website babycenter.com ranked Indiana dead last in the country for childcare. It found there are almost 4 times as many kids in need of care as available spaces. Hoosier parents can expect to spend 19% of their income on childcare. Gave the state overall 6.6 out of 100 in their childcare scoring. This is just one organization, obviously. There are metrics there, but we know this is an issue that businesses care about because workers need childcare. Why do you think Indiana has struggled to fix this problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to it being a very Republican state, and they have, you know, they just don't generally want government to take over everything, right? They don't want to be the quote unquote nanny state where government pays for everyone's child care. But I think the Indiana Chamber of Commerce and other business groups have been working the last couple of years to really explain, like, this isn't just about childcare. This is about us having workers to do the jobs. And so hopefully that message might be getting through.
You always hear them say childcare is infrastructure. That's a phrase that is often used at the State House. Childcare is infrastructure on both sides, though. I've heard both sides say it. So maybe the message is getting through from the Chamber of Commerce. We'll see. Okay, another change is coming for almost 500,000 Hoosiers who rely on Medicaid for health insurance. Work requirements that were signed into law last year will begin to phase in starting on January 1st. Nikki, remind us how the work requirements work.
Yeah, just there for the people on the Medicaid expansion program, so not truly aged, disabled, blind. It's the working or the able-bodied adults. That's the program we're talking about, and they'll have to work, go to school, or volunteer 20 hours a week, 80 hours a month. There are lots of exceptions in there if you're pregnant or if you have a young child at home for childcare issues.
So there are exemptions there. There's some people who are exempt. Okay.
Yeah. But, you know, the fascinating part is Indiana also chose to do a look back on it. So it goes in January 1, but you will have, if you want to apply on January 1, you will have had to fill that for the 3 months before, from October forward. So, you know, it's going to come up much faster than we think.
This comes as we expect insurance on the marketplace to go up again next year, right?
Yeah, premiums will go up. People obviously have kept falling off the Medicaid rolls, and you know, there are varying estimates on how many people may or may not be able to meet this work requirement. The state says they don't have an estimate, which I find interesting. I mean, they have an actuarial firm. That seems like something they should know, but you know, we'll see. I think a lot of people already are working those 20 hours a week, but you know, having to prove it and you know, maybe you work 1 month but not the next month. It might depend in terms of whether you have. Another big issue is this medically frail exemption, and they're waiting for guidance from the federal government. There are lots of people with chronic diseases who have concerns about how they're going to reach
So there
that.
seems to be some sort of a gray area there with the medically frail.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Another pocketbook issue here in Indiana right now is focusing in on our utility bills.
Yeah, state regulators approved a rate hike request from AES Indiana for the 2nd year in a row, but not without a lot of pushback.
And this week, consumer advocates formally asked those state regulators to reconsider their approval.
Many customers say they're already struggling to keep up. I met one woman who says falling behind on her electric bill set off a chain of events that ultimately left her homeless.
I'm one of these people. You get up every day and you do the best you can.
It's an attitude 68-year-old Deb Rogers learned during the toughest moment of her life, watching her daughter die of cancer.
Because when you watch a 23-year-old child, to me, dying of cancer and still being positive every day, I feel like I don't have any room to complain, you know?
Staying positive, though, has gotten harder over the past 6 months after Deb became homeless in January.
So I would say in an average week, I spend maybe four nights in my vehicle.
This Jeep is where Deb sleeps most nights. The other she rotates between friends' couches. It's never where she thought she'd be at 68.
It sucks. It sucks.
Deb says the road here started a few years ago when her utility bills went up.
My bill doubled, or more than that. So I called them and I said, make this make sense.
Deb says she got on a payment plan but still couldn't keep up and got behind.
I come home one day and my electric is shut off.
She says she applied for energy assistance to try and get the lights back on, but the wait was too long, even if it had come through, though.
It wouldn't have mattered because I still couldn't pay that bill, that size every month.
Deb says when she told her apartment manager the situation,
she said, we can't have anybody living without electricity on.
So Deb made the decision not to renew her lease, knowing at that point, with her utility bills now higher, she couldn't afford them and rent too.
I couldn't pay it all. And let's say I could, I wouldn't have a penny to live on.
We hear stories like that all the time, and it's heartbreaking.
Kerwin Olson is with Citizens Action Coalition, CAC, a utility consumer advocacy organization. CAC, along with the state agency that represents utility customers, filed petitions with the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, asking them to reconsider the AES rate hike approval.
Folks are struggling. The affordability crisis is real, and this order is something that I hope the commission revisits, using stories like this as illustrative examples.
For Deb Rogers, she's not sure if anything will make a difference in her case.
The hopeless and helplessness, I think, is the thing that bothers me most.
A feeling she was able to fight against before, even after losing a child. A fight she just doesn't have in her anymore.
I feel like it's over. I have no hope.
Man, you hate to hear that. Hopeless and helpless.
Yeah. And she's never felt that way before. So she says she was always somebody who paid her bills on time. That was a big thing for her. So there's, a lot of shame in that, she was explaining, right? And she has some health issues that she's dealing with. So, Nikki, what comes next in this? Do you expect the IURC to meet again on this issue?
Yeah, I mean, they certainly will. I don't think this happens very much, so it's unclear. But I kind of see this like lots of times in court cases. They'll ask a judge to reconsider a ruling. I think it's kind of a Hail Mary, right? You're asking the same people to reconsider. So unless there's new facts or evidence that can be produced, I'm not sure they'll get a different result. It also kind of depends on whether one of the members who was a yes vote, he's resigned and they're looking to replace him. So depending on timing, I don't know if that could change the vote maybe.
So there's a 5-member IURC commission, and Governor Braun, didn't he replace the chair of that commission the day after the rate hike approval, right?
Yeah.
And then you mentioned there's some more turnover. So do you think that would make a difference?
It might, only because the new chair cannot vote on this case because he used to work for the Office of Utility Consumer Counselor, and he was involved in that case. So he'll be recused. That leaves 4. Now, 2 of the yeses are still there, but Mr. Valletta, who just left, he will be gone. We're doing interviews next week with the top 12 finalists. So if they can, replace them quickly, I don't know what a tie vote would mean. Not sure.
And the other parties have a chance to respond to these petitions, right?
Absolutely.
AES can come in and say, hey, here's why we don't think this is a good idea.
Yeah, this will go on for weeks, months. I mean, utility cases like this are never quick.
No.
So if the IURC in some scenario would reverse this decision, would you expect there to be a legal challenge from AES?
I wouldn't be surprised by it, I'll be honest. They can always ask an impartial judge who's maybe not being pressured as much by the governor as they are to look at the evidence.
And do you think the pressure's there? The pressure's there.
Oh, from the governor? Absolutely.
Has made the comments that he has said, right? I mean,
yes.
And Kerwin Olson with Citizens Action Coalition saying, hey, while we would like to see this decision reversed, we're uncomfortable with, in their words, feeling like the governor has put his thumb on the scale of this.
And he came out and said, he called it unacceptable. He called the rate
Absolutely.
hike request approval unacceptable.
And he's already shown a penchant to sort of, quote, discipline someone who he didn't appreciate their vote by moving them from chair to a regular member.
All right, we'll continue to follow the twists and turns there, certainly.
Okay, thanks, Nikki. More to come here on Crossroads.
It's been a frustrating week for peace efforts in the Middle East.
Everybody's shocked because they thought they're going to stop the war, so everybody's scared again.
Now, the setback for the U.S. and how it's responding still ahead. Plus,
are our boards conducting themselves differently, behaving differently, and making more political decisions?
Partisan school board elections, the debate over adding a D or an R next to candidates and the potential impact this fall. That's next.
welcome back. Changes are coming to Indiana school board elections this year. So when you go to the ballot box in November, you'll see school board candidates listed by their political party.
Jenna Webster explains just how many candidates chose to declare and how one state group is working to keep school boards nonpartisan.
Summer days mean mother-daughter time at the park.
When I was 4.
Come this fall, Erin will be in 2nd grade. And Mom Autumn Ledsinger will have new decisions to make about who represents their family on the school board.
I think it's been a thing, but now that it's broadcasted, it could cause some changes, for sure.
That's because this year, school board candidates must decide if they'll declare a party.
They could shy away from being more of a team of unity, that if there's parties involved.
We'll have to see whether that impacts school board governance in the months to come.
Terry Spradlin is the executive director of the Indiana School Boards Association. The group collected all the data and found half of candidates did choose a party. Of those, the overwhelming majority are Republicans, followed by independents and Democrats. Spradlin says it's more common to see party declarations in urban areas.
We have no precedent. We have no prior history to really judge whether that's a high number or a low number.
Lawmakers argued it could drive up voter turnout and help voters choose a candidate that aligns with their values. But the ISBA lobbied against the legislation for years, saying politics should stay out of the boardroom.
Are our boards conducting themselves differently, behaving differently, and making more political decisions? Is there impasse in the boardroom because of division along political lines?
ISBA is telling candidates and voters to keep the focus on the kids, not their own politics.
I'm sure people's political opinions do have some influence on the way they vote on the school board. But in most cases, the issues are not political. They're educational, and that's the way it should stay.
I feel like it gets a little easier once you get up
And here at the park, voters say they plan to take that advice into the ballot box, planning to research their candidates before they vote. In Indianapolis, Jenna Webster, 13 News.
As for which school board candidates will be listed first on the ballot, that depends on who the county voted for in the state Secretary of State race.
And I thought that was a little bit confusing. So let's give you an example here. Republicans will be at the top in Morgan County on the ballot because Diego Morales won there back in 2022. Democrats will be at the top of the ballot. You'll see them first in Marion County.
In all cases, candidates who did not choose a party will be listed last. Nikki, do you think this will end up making a difference in November?
Gosh, I don't know. I think in smaller communities, people know whether they're Republican or Democrat anyway, because that's just, the way it is. Maybe not in a major city, but in most communities, I think this probably isn't necessarily different or will change much because people understand where those people are seated. I also, a lot of school issues just aren't political. I realize, of course, there are some that venture into the politics, but, hiring and budgeting and, things like that. So it'll be interesting to watch how this plays out.
And some people have asked, wait, so they have to have a D or an R? They have to choose a party? That's not the case, right? You can be nonpartisan. You'll just be listed at the end. I wonder if that might dissuade some people, the whole making school board elections partisan, that might dissuade some people from otherwise running.
It definitely will. And then we heard that during session.
Yes.
We heard people, I think I remember even Senator Liz Brown got up and gave an example that she first ran for school board before she was political. She said if she had to declare then, she wouldn't have done it because she was just caring about the school district. She wasn't a very political person at that time. So I know it will. There's also an issue with, depending on if you have federal contracts or if you're a federal employee, you're not allowed to do overtly partisan issues. And so there's an issue about whether some people are even allowed to run.
Okay, let's move on here to a new look at Indiana's legislative races. They suggest Democrats are competing in more districts this year while Republicans are sitting some out. Take a look. Democrats will have candidates on the ballot in nearly every race for the Indiana House and Senate this fall. Party leaders say this is the party's broadest legislative recruitment effort in years. Republicans, meanwhile, are not fielding candidates in 20 House districts that are currently held by Democrats. GOP leaders say, look, they're focusing campaign resources on districts where they have the best chance to win or protect seats rather than trying for an upset in heavily Democratic districts. You can read this story in the Indiana Capitol Chronicle online. It's important to point out also here that even with Democrats expanding the map, Republicans are still going into this election with commanding majorities.
Yeah, that's right. The GOP currently controls the House with a 69-30 advantage, and it holds a 40-10 majority in the Indiana Senate. To break the Republican supermajority in the House, Democrats would need to gain at least 6 seats this fall.
Nikki, do you think that could happen?
That's a lot for one election cycle. I mean, I could see them gaining 2 or 3. It's impressive that they fielded all these. You can't win if you don't take the shot, right? But I also understand Republicans trying to focus their resources on races that they really need to hold and maintain their majority rather than pick up any else, because a lot of those Democrat districts are so solid that you really just can't win there.
Nikki, what does a supermajority mean? In other words, what would Republicans stand to lose if they lose a supermajority?
Well, basically, I mean, the basics is that right now they can theoretically go in and act without any Democrats on the floor. They don't need them for a quorum. And when things get really testy and, in the past when you've seen Democrats walk out, then business halts. Well, right now that doesn't matter. In non-tangible terms, it's more about, when you have to work more closely with the opposite side to get a bill passed, you're a little more open to compromise. And I just think that over the years since I've been there, from when it was like 51-49 to now, an example, I just think the ability to compromise and work together on a bill is a lot less than it used to be. And that's partially because of the supermajority.
It's changed a lot.
The Indiana Black Expo's summer celebration is underway this week in Indy, and as always, some national headliners are in town for it.
That includes Pastor and U.S. Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia. It was a night centered on faith, but as you might expect, politics found its way into the conversation.
From the altar at Grace Apostolic Church Thursday night, the keynote speaker wore 2 hats interchangeably during his remarks. That of one of the nation's most recognizable pastors.
I want to talk to you tonight about God's vision for the land.
And also as one of the leading Democratic voices in politics.
It feels like we awake every single day in a strange land. Strange decisions being made. These are strange times.
As a longtime pastor at Atlanta's Ebenezer Baptist Church, once led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Warnock is no stranger to blending faith and politics when he speaks, often talking about the intersection of faith and public service. Thursday, he called out Republicans for praying before passing the One Big Beautiful Bill that Warnock called ugly.
I saw them praying, but after I watched what they did, I had to ask myself, well, who were they praying to and what were they praying about? Because the God I know lifts valleys. God I know cares about the people in the valley.
The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office estimates the new law will leave roughly 10 million more Americans without health insurance by 2034 because of changes to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. The law also makes significant cuts to SNAP, though the CBO has not issued a single estimate of how many people will lose food assistance benefits. Warnock's visit comes as Democrats nationwide look ahead to November's midterm election, when control of Congress will once again be on the ballot.
I got a feeling that come November, the valleys are going to rise up and speak to the crooked places in this nation and hold them to account.
Warnock's message echoing a theme that ran throughout his remarks: faith, justice, and engagement beyond just church walls.
And summer celebration continues next week as well.
A lot of events.
Tensions in the Middle East rising even more this week after the U.S. and Iran trade more airstrikes.
Tehran's response that could derail the effort to end the conflict. Next here on Crossroads Politics. Welcome back. The ceasefire with Iran is at least temporarily over.
A setback this week. The U.S. and Iran have been exchanging strikes, with the U.S. pounding Iranian targets with airstrikes after 3 civilian ships were targeted in the Strait of Hormuz.
Iran has responded, targeting American military bases in the region. There's been no word of any American casualties, and President Trump warns they may target him as well.
I have a threat all the time. I'm number 1 on their list.
The escalation comes just after the funeral for the former supreme leader who was killed in a surprise attack by the U.S. in Israel. Oil prices have gone up but have not spiked, on hopes the ceasefire can be restored.
We shall see. And this week, President Trump approved Ukraine to build its own Patriot missile systems. Ukraine has been using swarms of drones to cripple Russian oil supplies so badly, parts of Russia are now rationing gasoline. Ukraine has been striking targets more than 1,000 miles from the front lines.
Back here in the United States, the governor of Kentucky has asked Senator Mitch McConnell's office for an update on his health. McConnell was hospitalized roughly a month ago and has not been seen since. Under Kentucky law, if McConnell cannot serve as a senator, a special election will be called to replace him.
Yeah, a lot of tight lips over his medical condition right now. And one of the other big national headlines in politics this week came out of Maine, where Senate candidate Graham Plattner, you see him right there, he announced he's leaving the race. Plattner was the Democrat challenging longtime Republican Senator Susan Collins, who was seen as vulnerable for the first time in a long time. But an ex-girlfriend accused Plattner of sexual assault, and Democrats began withdrawing support. A replacement candidate has not been named. Plattner, by the way, denies the accusations against him. Time is ticking, though, for Maine. The Democrats have got to pick a candidate here in the next couple of months to run in the November election.
Well, that does it for this week's episode of Crossroads Politics. I'm Emily Longnecker.
And I'm Dustin Grove. For Nikki, Jenna, and all of us here at 13 News, thanks so much for watching. We hope to see you next time.